Our guest today is a writer, a sexuality educator, and the filmmaker behind At Your Cervix, a powerful documentary about the prevalence of non consensual pelvic exams across the country. A'magine Goddard, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So let's start with your film's shocking revelation. 90% of medical students are learning how to do pelvic exams on women under anesthesia without consent. We have all in agreement. We had no idea that this was done. How is this possible?
Such a great question. I think that the film chronicles how this happened. We talk about the history of gynecology, which, if people don't know, gynecology started because of abuses and violations on Black enslaved women in the South, primarily, but not only, by a doctor named Marion Sims, who was then lauded as the father of gynecology. And he certainly did discover some things through that work, but that was because he experimented on non-consenting people, and he did that work without anesthesia. So we're talking about cutting into their bodies, their reproductive and sexual organs. I've been under anesthesia for those things, and it's painful. So I can't even imagine what that would have been like. And so I think if we just look at that as the genesis of gynecology as a discipline, it's very easy to see how we landed here. This has been the way gynecology has been practiced from the very beginning. Women are often not listened to in healthcare. And Black women are especially not listened to in healthcare. We have lots and lots of research that shows that legacy, and so this is a direct descendant of that.
I've actually been under anesthesia for any number of obstetrical and gynecological issues, lots of fertility treatments, but other cysts removed, just lots of things. And I have to say, like, this is appalling to me. I mean, the realization, I watched the trailer, it's been in my mind ever since yesterday when I watched it. I mean, I cannot, uh, I just can't fathom this. So I have to say, like, what did you hear from, the patients that you interviewed, and what's been the reaction from people? Like, what are people, when they see this, what do they think? Like, what do we need to do to fix it?
Yeah, people get very activated when they see the film, as we
Yeah.
should. That's an
Yeah.
appropriate reaction.
Hmm.
Um, I think it's similar to what you just said, like, how could this possibly be legal? We actually have a section in the film that we start with that, because that is always the question. Like, how is this possible? How in the
Hmm.
United States of America in 2024 is this hidden practice happening generally as part of medical education? So I guess, just to elaborate a little for listeners, this typically happens in medical education. Students they go on their rotations. They have a series of rotations. One of those rotations is going to be an OBGYN rotation. That's how they determine what their specialty is going to be in medicine. And when they get to that rotation, they are often just ushered into surgery rooms, operating rooms, and asked to do exams on anesthetized patients after they've been put under anesthesia for a procedure. There's a couple different reasons why they might be asked to do that. One would be to experience some kind of pathology. They might get to palpate a fibroid or a cyst or a tumor or whatever, and it gives them an opportunity to do that. And the other is to hone their skills in terms of pelvic exams. And I would say, as someone who used to teach pelvic exams for 10 years in all the major medical schools in New York City, that's not a good learning experience. You're not learning what you need to learn if a patient is anesthetized, because that's never going to be the way a body that is not anesthetized is going to feel. When all of those muscles are relaxed under anesthesia, it's not going to even simulate that, other than, you know, the general, being able to discover the general setup of parts and where you might place fingers. So, but this has gone on from, the beginning of medicine. I mean, medicine is very much based on an apprenticeship model where students are learning from preceptors, they're learning from surgeons and doctors, and they do what they're told. It is a very, very conformist space. Students are, it's very, very hard for a student to say no. And that is something we are doing a lot of work around. We're actually working directly with medical students, with the American Medical Student Association and some other medical student organizations, because no one student can take on a system that just expects them to say yes and to violate patients when they're told to do that by a preceptor. Their grades are on the line, their whole career can be on the line if they step out. So, and I think we chronicle that also quite well in the film. There's several student stories. We get to really follow them on their journeys and get a sense of what that must be like, and the tremendous moral injury that puts a student through when they're asked to violate a patient in order to get their education.
And it sets up this relationship of not having top of mind, what would my patient want? What is my patient looking for? What is in my patient's best interest? Which we kind of think is supposed to be what's on doctors' top of mind. But it kind of trains them to not have that be top of mind the way we would all want it to be. So this is a little out of the box for us because being a political podcast, but it actually fits perfectly because this is just another way that women aren't given power over their own bodies. So how do you see these non-consensual exams fitting into the larger picture of misogyny in this country, of taking away women's bodily autonomy, of course, and even in politics?
I think this is a complete political issue, first of all. I think everything is political, but that's a whole other story. I mean, I think that this issue brings together so many of the conversations that we are having right now and that are ongoing because we certainly haven't fixed things. So this is about consent. The most basic idea of consent, that if you're gonna put fingers or implements into a person's body, that you are going to ask, that you are going to have consent for that, no matter what the context is, because in any other context, this would be sexual assault. And it was actually named medical sexual assault this year in a very well written piece in a feminist bioethics journal. So I think we need to look at the way that sexual assault is being reproduced in a medical context. What does that mean? What does that mean for the people that are being asked to participate in that, who don't have a lot of power in that context, i.e., the students? What does that mean for the people running those institutions and how they think about women's bodies, about vaginas in general? The idea that I think this is so emblematic of the idea that people in power should just have access to vaginas, can control vaginas. This has everything to do with reproductive justice and choice. This has everything to do with racial justice. We have new research that actually just came out 2 years ago from Lori Bruce at Yale did, showing that Black patients are 4 times as likely to experience this. So this is yet another health
Wow.
disparity. That's a tremendous difference.
Mm-hmm.
So as usual, as per our systems, the people who are most disenfranchised and who have the least political power are the most impacted.
Mm-hmm.
So, so I think, this is about all of those things. We're having these conversations about racial justice and reproductive justice and consent, and what does it mean to truly have bodily autonomy. So it just kind of all comes together here, and I think it's very symbolic of how this country has treated vaginas, women's bodies, queer bodies, people of color. It's all right there.
I couldn't agree more. I think this is emblematic of, just a bigger picture. And I have to say, and with now 2024, we're a few days into it. I just don't understand why this is legal, why this continues to be legal. And thank you for shedding a light on this and really telling this story. But, what legislation is in the works to stop this, and how is it worded? Like,
Yeah.
what are you trying to do?
Yeah, I mean, we are working on legislation because that's just like a basic baseline that we need to have.
Mhm. I mean, it
Um,
seems like it should be a policy of these institutions, of the hospitals, of everything. I mean, to me,
yeah,
like they should be stepping up there, but they're not. So now we're going to legislate it, and that I have
yeah,
issues with the fact that it just needs to be legislated. But
yeah.
whatever, this is where we're going to start.
Unfortunately, it does, and
Mhm.
doctors don't like to be legislated. They don't like to be told what they can and can't do.
Interesting. They
They
would
like
like
to have autonomy.
autonomy. It's
They
so
want autonomy. I know, isn't
interesting.
that?
Kind of what women want
Yeah, I
too.
know. And I mean, and that's really our position. It's like, if you don't want this legislated, then do the right thing. Where are your policies? Why is this still happening? There's new research that came out just last year. So often one of the critiques has been, well, that research showing that 90% of students have done this is 20 years old. That's a thing of the past. That doesn't happen anymore. Oh, really? Well, some brand new research just came out in 2022, a very well done research study. It was done across 5 different states and 6 different institutions. And they found across the board, 84% of students had done it at least once. This was last year. This is brand new. So, uh, and then of course people will say, oh, well, that wasn't good enough research or whatever. But, the point, whether you think
Ooh.
84% is the real number that's happening right now or not, the point is that it's happening. The point is that this is
Yes.
still happening, and
Even if
one is
it's
too many.
5%, it should be 0%. Like, bringing it
Mhm.
down from 90%
Yep.
to 84% is ridiculous, and if they don't like the research, like, great, then come up with your own research. That's if you think that's not right, but until you come up with your own research, 84% is a number. That's the best number that we have right now.
Yeah.
That's the number we're sticking with, and I am just shocked by that number still, 84%. And I think about, I've had a number of, minor surgical procedures, from knee surgeries and tonsils out, and I'm wondering, like, did this happen to me and I didn't even know it? Like, how can we advocate for ourselves individually to make sure this doesn't happen to us? Can we? Like, if we tell a doctor before surgery,
Yeah,
"I don't want you to do this," can they just, I mean, I guess they could just do it anyway, no matter what we say. Is that right?
at the end of the day, you're not ever really gonna know necessarily. When we do have several patient stories in the film. It was very hard to get patient stories because, um, most people don't know that this has happened. They were under anesthesia. They were unconscious, and they don't have a memory. But we also know from research that the body remembers, right? The body has a memory. There's a cellular memory. And so sometimes, we've heard from people over the years who say, something did not feel right when I came out of this surgery. Or we hear from people that say they had pain, vaginal pain or vulvar pain, and didn't quite understand that given whatever their procedure was. Um, I would say most often this is done under OBGYN. It is done when there's something related happening. But we do have stories of abdominal surgery and knee surgery, of it happening in other contexts. So it's not to say that it cannot happen in those other contexts. We're doing a lot of workshops right now, working with patients. We want patients to learn how to advocate for themselves. I think it's a multi-pronged approach. Number one, you don't just have to sign a consent form and have no input on it. You can cross things out. You can write things in. You can say, I do not consent to educational exams um, with students, or you can say, I will consent to one if there's a student on the team, but I want to meet them first. I want to talk about it. You can put whatever parameters you want to put on that form. That is yours. That is your agreement with your surgeon. Now, That said, I have heard stories where surgeons have said, well, if you don't sign our consent form, then we'll just have to reschedule. We'll have to do this another time, or you'll have to go to another facility. Obviously, when you have spent months planning for a surgery, uh, that's very hard for people. That puts an incredible burden on a patient. So, but I think number one, take control of your consent form. Number two, talk with your surgeon verbally about it. Ask questions. How are there going to be students on the team? Tell me how you work with students. I always ask open-ended questions, and I just had major gynecological surgery myself this summer, and this is what I did with my surgeon. How do you work with students? Tell me about that. What role are they going to play in my surgery? Will they be doing exams? Will they be doing an exam on me? And then ask more directly. Get a sense from your surgeon what their vibe is about how they mentor their students. I think that's super, super important.
I want to go back to the legislative piece. What are the laws that are being proposed, and what has been the reaction to that?
Yeah, so I think number one, we just need that basic baseline of legislation that protects patients, because we have heard from, like, there was a patient who tells her story but doesn't share her identity in the film because she was actually a nurse who was violated at the facility where she works.
Oh
And
my
she found
goodness.
out about it because the resident
Oh.
told her so after
Mhm.
the exam, or after the procedure, and she had specifically told uh, her surgeon that she did not want that. So, when she went
Wow.
to talk to 3 different attorneys, they all told her the same thing. "You have no leg to stand on. Nothing illegal was done." Um, and
Oh.
at the end of the day, it was gonna be her word against the surgeon's word, and so she ended up going on
Mhm.
to get a law passed in her state. So, unfortunately, many of the laws that have been passed already, there are 26 laws now, or 25, 26.
Mm.
So about half of the US now has a law on the books, but many of them are completely inadequate. They are very, very basic. The language is way too basic. There's no liability in the
Mhm.
laws. There's
Mhm.
no
Yeah.
accountability in the laws. And if there's no
Oh.
accountability, this isn't going to change, period.
Yeah, it has to have some teeth
No.
if it's not going to.
Is it really a law
Yeah,
if
I
there's no
mean,
Yeah.
or
enforcement of it?
they'll say,
Yeah.
the professional body that is the one that gets to handle this, and we kind of know what happens when that's the
Mhm.
case. It needs
Yeah.
to be something else. So this past year, we worked with some incredible legislators in the state of Colorado, and we drafted a
Oh,
bill from
Colorado.
scratch. We wrote it. Everyone keeps kind of recycling the same language that keeps getting used in different states,
Mm,
and it's so unfortunate, and that's actually what's happening in Ohio right now. And
okay.
that's also, happening in Massachusetts. So those are 2 states we are working on right now to make those laws better, those bills better before they pass into law. We worked very hard on that Colorado law that is now our model law for, the rest of the states. There's accountability in the law. It names all the players. It names who this applies to. It outlines a very specific consent process. None of the laws besides this one and the one that just passed in Pennsylvania have that really clear consent process. And moreover, there is whistleblower protection for
Mm,
students in that law. And that piece is really, really important, because the only reason we know that this happens is because of students who have spoken out, students that have taken
mm.
these surveys, students that have found ways to not harm their patients in this way, who have said no. It's very, very hard for a medical student to do. So I am so grateful to students. I am an advocate for students. As I said, we're working to help students and lift them up, because no one actor can take on a system. This is a systemic issue. This is across states. This is across the country. This is in other parts of the world. It's not just here. And so we need a systemic response. And so legislation is one piece of it, and those students need that whistleblower protection because they're not employees. So most states do have some kind of whistleblower protection, but it's usually for an employee. Students are not, and so they easily fall through the cracks, and can and do face tremendous retribution if they step out of line. So that is something we want to see in more of these laws. We're advocating very hard for that. And then the other thing that makes that law good, that more laws are starting to take on, is that it applies to people of all genders and all intimate exams, because we also know that rectal prostate exams can happen to men, to people with penises when they are in for surgical procedures as well. So we want all people to be protected. And I think sometimes when people hear that, like, oh, it could happen to me too, it's like, oh, okay, then maybe they see that a little differently. And I think we just have more data about the pelvic exams, but we do know that other exams happen. So that legislative piece is like, it's like the base piece, but I think the bigger piece is, how do we change the culture of medicine that teaches us that this is okay, and that, teaches students this is okay, that teaches patients you should just accept whatever it is, you should just suck it up. We need a system that treats patients differently and that creates a different dynamic between providers and patients.
Well, I think it's really critical what you're doing, because you're raising awareness, because so many people did not know about this at all. So if you can raise awareness and have a discussion about it, then when students get in there and this happens to them, it won't be the first time they've heard of it, because everyone is stunned. And these are younger people, and maybe they're not used to advocating for themselves or speaking out. And certainly it is in a very hierarchical environment that they're in as students, and just in the medical profession as well. So the more we can talk about it and just know that it exists is really great. And I thank you for doing this work and for bringing awareness to it. So to that end, where can our listeners go to find out more about your work and to, maybe see the film for themselves?
Yeah, go to atyourcervixmovie.com. Everything is there, all of our upcoming screenings and things. We're currently setting up our spring tour. We're touring colleges and universities and nursing and medical schools and things right now. If people want to bring us to their community, we would love to come. And what we have found when we do screenings, back to your earlier question, like, how do people respond? No one leaves. No one leaves at the end of the film. Usually if the directors or producers or whatever talking about their film at the end, there's like a third of the audience that's going to like quietly slip out. But people really don't leave because they need to talk about this. They want to talk about it. There's a lot of issues in the film. It's centered on this particular thing, and then the history of the gynecological teaching associate work. But it just raises bigger questions about medicine and medical education and the kind of healthcare that we get. And so I think people, they want to engage. We definitely, we want to work with people. We want to work with people on the ground in the states that we're working in. We're working in this year. There's, 6 or 7 states that we are engaging with legislators with and trying to advocate for these better, more comprehensive laws, because we do need that. Not that it's going to make everything perfect and it's going to make this go away, but it sends a very clear message. And it's important that we have that. And as you say, patients need to know what their rights are, how they can advocate. And I think those changes are slower, that cultural change in medicine, that's a slower change, but that's something we need more of us. The more of us that speak up and say, this is not okay, this is unacceptable, then the faster this.
It's very much a cultural thing, because I think a lot of people are afraid. They don't think they have the right in those situations to speak up, or they're intimidated because they think this is a doctor. They know, they have all this knowledge. This is a medical professional. They know more than me, but you still have your rights. And that's a whole other subject and a whole other piece. But I think it definitely plays into what is going on here and what is happening. Thank you just so much for joining us and for this work that you've done. This is very, obviously you feel very strongly and passionate about it. And, the education work that you're doing in addition to making this documentary, it's really meaningful. And
I appreciate that.
Thank you so much.
Please join us.
Thank
Join
you.
us in this. The more people that are involved, the more we can do. So people can just reach out to us through atyourcervixmovie.com and join our mailing list, and we'll keep you abreast.
I love the name.
Great.
Thanks for having me, y'all.
Awesome.